The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Comito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.
Mike, we're back, and this is Season 3 of The Unlikely Innovators. Under a new format. It used to be a weekly innovation podcast, but now we heard our listeners and they said we want less. So now we've moved to a monthly format. Now, of course, we're trying to do quality over quantity. Everything's going to be on location, and we're just really happy to be back bringing those unlikely stories of innovation to our listeners each month.
Yes, and we're here at the Chemical Analysis and Scientific Services suite at Cambrian College. So it's not the ideal podcast studio because if you can't see this, but it's a great visual backdrop, but there is a constant hum from the instruments that we have behind us. So Paul will be working hard behind the scenes to help us sound good, but he always succeeds. So I have no doubt that we'll have different locations that will have less ambient noise, but we wanted to show you where a lot of the work happens at Cambrian. Our guest today is Dr. Nadia Mykytczuk, who is, I think one of the reasons we wanted to bring her on today was to talk about her new industrial research chair term that she started with NHFC, with Merarco, with Cambrian, and with partners like Vale, because a lot of the work that she'll be doing in the biomining and bioremediation space, we'll be doing some of that work here. She'll also be in the field. She'll also be doing work at Laurentian as well. But we wanted to kind of show you where a lot of the work that happens behind the scenes for that research.
Yeah, and I'm doing my part to be frugal, of course. This is a hand-me-down lab coat that I'm using, because when we had these made, I actually hadn't joined the team yet. So this is actually not my coat, as you can imagine. I haven't been working out so much.
I think that's how the scientists order tight-fitting. Yeah. It's the new style right now, right?
It's like skinny
Back in
jeans.
the day, they used to be baggy lab coats, but they're like tapered.
Yeah, I'll need to go down to the millwright shop to get some grease to take this off after. So that'll be some nice behind-the-scenes content. But of course, we're super pleased to have Nadia as the first returning guest we have on the pod, and really just great to hear an update from her on about the exciting things we're going to be doing together and all she's accomplished, in the days ahead. All right, and we're back, and we're joined by our guest, Dr. Nadia Mykytczuk. In my mind, whenever I see your name on paper, I just say Mykytczuk because I've had to spell it so many times whenever we're writing grants together. So I know how to spell your name pretty easily. But just a quick bio for Nadia. Obviously, the first time we've had a repeat guest on the show, so we're super pumped about that. And thanks for joining us. Nadia is now serving as the CEO and president of Merarco in Sudbury. She also serves as in the role of executive director of the Goodman School of Mines at Laurentian University. She has 18 years of experience working in environmental microbiology with a focus on mining systems and the development of bioleaching and bioremediation technologies, I'm sure we'll talk about today. Now that she's under Merarco, she's embarking on the development of a center for Mine Waste Biotechnology in Sudbury. Estimated price tag on that will be about $21 million, and we're really excited to talk about that today too. And its aim is to advance to scale up and commercialize biotechnologies for mine waste treatment with industry and private sector partners. Also, since we last spoke, she's the new NOHFC Industrial Research Chair in Biomining and Bioremediation, where she'll leverage her existing industrial and research partnerships established over the last 12 years to help deliver on new technologies for critical minerals and supporting sustainable mining practices. We're really happy to have you back on the show. We just thought that so much has happened since we last spoke that it made sense to kick off our next season with just an update and another chat with you. So thanks so much for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. And it's fun to actually be here in person and not on Zoom.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we are in the CAS facility here on campus. As you could tell, this isn't a typical studio. It's not a white screen or a green screen. We're actually here live and in person. So I think what we wanted to do, we talked about your sort of career path last time, but we want to delve a bit deeper to start, and then we'll talk about some of these exciting updates. But if I look at the child Nadia Mykytczuk, I'm thinking of dark hair with some red streaks, but maybe 3 feet tall. Yeah. What drew you to science as a child, like at that level? Were you interested in that? Is that what you thought you were going to get into?
Yeah, I think as a child, you don't realize what your path is going to be. But now looking back at what makes an inquisitive science type person, I was that child from the beginning, always asking questions, always poking at things, picking up spiders and other things and asking what's different about this one. following my dad around, who was a walking encyclopedia of always willing to give me the scientific answer. And now I realize I'm just like him, I'm like, well, of course, this is what it is, So it's funny that, the 3-foot version of me was probably very much like me now, not afraid to ask and look at things with a new lens and say, okay, well, I want to know more about that. And I want to figure out, what's mysterious about this new thing.
Writing fewer grants, perhaps, though.
Yes. If I had told my 7-year-old self that was in my future, I probably would have shied away from it. I think most people don't realize what scientists do. It's not hang out in labs like this beautiful one.
Yeah.
A lot of us spend time behind the desk coming up with ideas and research programs and writing a lot of grants.
Yeah, we were talking off camera just how it's we're joining you from grant application season, so we equally thank you for spending time with us during this busy time.
I just want to pick up on something you said. I have a couple of 3-foot scientists at my house right now, and they're constantly asking me questions, many of which I don't know the answer to. So I was just wondering if you had any advice for non-scientific parents out there who want to encourage their kids to ask those questions, but they may not have the answers readily available.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things there. One, just support the inquisitive nature rather than saying like, I don't have time to answer that. Be like, that is super cool. Like, way to go. I also wonder about that. And try to encourage that rather than discourage them asking questions and maybe being a little bit annoying, but feeding that, because I think nowadays kids with the social media we have, they're so easily distracted that I find there's less of that natural inquisitive nature being nurtured. So just give them whatever answer to keep them excited. In the meantime, you now have Google. Yeah. Our parents didn't have Google. They actually had to, maybe go look at encyclopedias or come up with God knows what answer. But give yourself some time, and maybe when there's a quiet moment in breakfast or you need to distract and be like, hey, do you remember asking me that question 2 days ago? Well, look at what I found out. Or maybe you found a cool YouTube video that'll engage them on the topic, and just keep that mind sharp and excited.
My nephew's really into Minecraft right now. And I thought that was just like a silly game, but like he's talking about like we have to smelt iron and mix it with copper. We have to build a smelter. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's going to be like in the mining sector.
No, it's a genius vehicle, actually. We should tap into it more to try, again, gamify. And you guys are doing this at Cambrian. You've got game development. I think there needs to be more connection between gamification, because that's what our kids are used to now, and shoving that information into their brains and making them love it, right? Like they can identify minerals in square block pixel form that they didn't know they knew.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
So it's pretty cool.
It's like sneaking the green beans in with the mashed potatoes, so to speak.
Or in the pasta sauce.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So now that you're on the Mount Rushmore of Unlikely Innovators, because you're our first 2-time guest, we can embarrass you a little bit at the outset of the episode. So normally this lab is full of young scientists who are plying their trade here at Cambrian, and many of them look up to you. So one of the questions we wanted to ask you was, on some level you must know that there are a lot of people in the community, not only in Sudbury, but across the scientific community in Canada, that look up to you and view you as a role model. Can you reflect on that, but also talk about the role that some of the mentors and role models that you had and how they encouraged you to continue on this path?
That's a very humbling statement. I think it's when you're going full force every day, you don't stop to think that there's other people looking up to you. And I am cognizant of that. I think, in my previous role as a professor, you always sort of encounter people, but as any mentor, you have to sort of, you lead by example, but you also need to communicate what are the mistakes you probably can avoid making. And anybody who comes up to me, male or female, and says, well, I'm really amazed at how easy you make this look. I'm like, well, it's really, full poker face aside, it's really not easy. And it does come through failure and experience and trying things. But there's lots of, advice I wish I'd had to maybe work around some of the big hurdles and challenges that, maybe took 3, 4, 5 years to overcome. And maybe I'd be a little bit further along the path if I had known. That being said, I did have a lot of mentors and people I looked up to. Early in my career, I thought I'd be a bench scientist and an old crotchety professor for the rest of my life. And I was like, that's cool. I can grow into, weird jackets and, elbow pads and other things. But looking at scientists that were well established, working not only in academia, but in government labs internationally, and being like, they are still really cool, doing amazing stuff, moving the needle forward on, discoveries that are needed for our society. And so always having somebody there, always find that next person that you aspire to. And sometimes maybe you do catch up to them and then find somebody else. And I think that keeps you learning, keeps you improving and driving. So when people say, oh, you've made it, I'm like, absolutely not. I'm just a few steps ahead of the people that look up to me.
Well, I think you have two fanboys, I suppose, and Michael and I. I don't know.
Friends.
Friends.
Fanboys.
Yeah. I mean, we have Mykytczuk t-shirts, but we didn't wear them today, so as to not embarrass you. But I mean, obviously, I think the audience could tell that we've been working together for a while, and we've developed a bit of a shorthand. But I think it's interesting that recently, I think our relationship got more formalized than ever, as we're partnering now on this new industrial research chair with partners like Vale. Can you talk about this new chair that you now sit in, so to speak, and how what you'd like to accomplish over its 5-year term and what the goals might be?
It is really exciting, and I'm so grateful for you guys in being willing to work with me, support me on it, engage in the science, and actually see that vision and find ways for an applied research program, a college system, industry partners to work together. We live that every single day, but I think maybe your listeners don't realize that it's actually very hard to marry all those components and execute on a research program that's actually hoping to achieve and deliver solutions to the mining industry. And so what I'm really excited about, this is my second industrial research chair. My first one did make some headway. We had some new discoveries, accomplishments, trained lots of students. But with this one, I actually want to deliver on what we always write into the grants of like the blue sky, like, yes, we will deliver something amazing at the end. I actually think we can do it within 5 years. And we're only going to be able to do it because of partnerships like this, of leveraging the capacity that we have in all of our institutions and bringing all those pieces together. So I'm thrilled to be working with you guys, and I know it's going to be hilarious also. So, it makes, the work becomes more fun that way.
Yeah, no, for sure it does. And I think us being a part of it formally, if we're all singing from the same song sheet and rowing in the same direction, and any other partnership euphemism I could put into that, I think it's going to be great. And I think 5 years is going to fly by, but I think it's going to be one of those things where also, the importance of this new climate of critical minerals is going to feed a lot of wind to that sail as well.
Actually, you've teed me up so well, Steve. It's almost like we've been doing this for 3 years now. But everyone's talking about critical minerals, and that's a big part of the focus of your research chair over the next 5 years. One of the things that Steve and I have talked about, and we probably talked about this with you, is that right now the demand for critical minerals is so high, and there's either not enough in the ground, or even if there is enough in the ground, we can't get to them quickly enough to meet this demand. But there's a lot of critical minerals that we can kind of recuperate through biomining, and bioremediation. Can you talk about the role that your work plays in helping to try to recapture some of these critical minerals that we're desperately looking for right now at the provincial and federal level?
Yeah, I think it's not even just a Canadian problem; it's a global problem, and we hear the words a lot now, and it's good when things like critical minerals and battery supply chain is now entering into regular societal discourse. But what I think is the gap that still exists is understanding, like you said, how are we going to get there? If you guys are like me, you've probably already put your name down on a list for an electric vehicle that may or may not show up in the next 2-3 years. What people don't realize is it's not a technology issue right now or a manufacturing issue. It's the raw material that is not available. And we have to open 400 new mines. We can't possibly do that in a short space of time. So we have to look at these other materials, wastes, things that are already in production or on the surface or in supply somewhere, and recover those. The challenge with those is that usually they're low grade. So what we work on in mine waste materials are really low concentrations of critical minerals. But what happens when you have a lot of that, and we're talking hundreds of millions of tons of waste sitting at the surface, is that when you multiply that, even a less than 1% nickel multiply that by 100 million, suddenly you have a lot of nickel.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is find the technologies that can help us extract that really low concentration without breaking the bank. And that's where technologies like biomining come in. Bacteria work very cheaply. We can keep, as long as we can keep them happy and working efficiently, they can extract that metal with less energy, less of a carbon footprint than a smelter or even a hydromet plant. So we really have to develop and accelerate the production and transfer those solutions to industry if we're going to try and tap a very real resource that right now we're considering a waste product.
Well, and I mean, what a differentiation. I mean, I've talked at length at how close mining is to the consumer now through this revolution. What a differentiation for Canada if we can start, mining our mine waste, in a very low energy, low carbon footprint way. I mean, it makes our resources much more saleable to, economies where that matters, right?
Absolutely. And I think one thing Canada doesn't realize is that, we do have a very progressive environmental and environmental social governance perspective on new mining operations. But we do have a pretty dark history of environmental impacts. And because Canada is so large and we sort of have the advantage of our geography, we just put our mine waste aside and we left it there.
Yeah.
Other jurisdictions like Europe and other parts of the world where communities are so close to the mine waste, they had to deal with them and often, put them underground or dispose of the waste in a way that they're no longer as accessible. A lot of Canadian waste is still just sitting at the surface and largely intact in the same way that it was even 100 years ago when it was deposited.
Yeah.
So we have a double potential advantage here. We have a win-win situation if we can address some of that darker history of, not really environmentally sustainable mining practices, extract that metal, and also help clean up some of that history.
And that's that's inspiring to me because I think of that dark history where not even 100 years ago, smelting nickel out in the open in these giant roast heaps that were the size of football fields. And now we're talking about using bacteria to break down mine waste, right? It's come a long way. I mean, there's still a lot more that we need to do, but it is kind of, if you flip it the other way, we did a lot of bad things within this previous century, right? So
yeah, it's time for a redemption story coming out of the Sudbury Basin. Right?
And I think that legacy is an important one to acknowledge at the onset because here we can't just say, we've got our new solution for critical minerals and here's what it is, guys.
Yeah.
I think that has to start with the admission of, we didn't do things properly in the past and we have to do that better because I think as the globe is running to try and meet those critical minerals demands, we run the risk of making some of those same mistakes.
Yeah.
And if you're going to say, we need those batteries, so it doesn't matter if we pollute the environment or damage some ecosystems, we we can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So I think it's an opportunity for us to really fix the way we did things and address a big problem that we're all facing now.
Yeah, and I mean the work that you're going to be doing with the research chair, I think is going to work to get that football, to use your analogy, further towards the end zone. But wouldn't it be great if there was a center that then also, took those nascent technologies and worked to commercialize it? Perhaps I'm leading the witness here, but you're working on an exciting project that we've been talking about for some time.
Yes.
You and I through the years, and it just seems, what I like about this, and I'll let you reveal, but we've been talking about this center idea for some time because where do these technologies go to then get turned into companies? So maybe just talk a little bit about it and then sort of unveil. Many people in the community will know about this, but just for our listeners, what we're talking about.
Yes, so this center, this secret center that you're talking about, the Center for Mine Waste Biotechnology, which might have a catchier name at some point in the near future, but that idea that we threw around, I think it started almost 8-9 years ago, where we said, this is a thing we really need. It came from the understanding that there's a real gap, right? It's one thing to talk about what it's like to get minerals out of the ground and into batteries and moving across that supply chain. But when you talk about developing technologies, they have to go through so many stages, and no one entity or institution does them all, right? No startup is developing an idea from a bench scale and then moving it all the way through the technology readiness levels and delivering a commercial product. It takes too long, the investment's too high, and the return takes too long. So those initial ideas have to start in places like academic institutions and labs and research and government entities. That takes years, sometimes decades, to have that fundamental research to then say, you know what, we might actually have a solution here. And then we still don't have a ready technology. Getting it through those really difficult, that gap in the middle of maturing that technology to a point where you can actually test if it's commercial ready is not a service or a technology or a function that post-secondary institutions, the government labs do, or the private sector. And so when we talked about, how are we going to take these amazing ideas that I worked on in my academic career and get them through and deliver a solution to industry that we need right now, that's where the idea and that center was born, in that we need to help fill that gap. And we have to do things that we weren't really actually initially trained to do. What does it take to scale up and mature a technology, de-risk it, do the feasibility so that industry can look at you and say, now you're speaking our language. Now we can take what you say is possible and integrate it into our operations and deliver metals from mine waste using bacteria, right? It sounds great, but we have to demonstrate that it's actually possible. So that is what I'm hoping we achieve with the center, and we're getting close. We're getting close to hopefully getting the funding to break ground next year.
It's a really exciting time.
It is a really exciting time, and we're gonna kind of jump ahead into the future. Like, let's pretend we're 10 years in the future. The center it's built, it's humming, it's a hive of activity. We're on a different research chair term now, or maybe we're in something entirely different. What would be next for Nadia to conquer after the center's up and running? We fulfilled our obligations to NHFC and our industry partners through this current research chair. What's next? Have you thought about what's next? I know there's a lot going on right now, so it's easy to say, like, well, I haven't thought about 10 years, Mike, but thanks for asking me in front of the cameras. But what is next?
Yeah, 10 years isn't actually that far out when you think about research and technology development. So even within this first 5 years of getting the center up and running and delivering, those first 5 years, we're going to see our first handful of technologies that are ready to be implemented. But that's just a handful of technologies. I see actually a lifetime of work. The periodic table is vast. The types of wastes that are out in our community and society and industry are vast. And every single one of those needs a different solution. So we're not coming up with a widget, and once we make the widget, all problems solved. This is going to be a process. So 10 years from now, I would love to have that center up and running so fluidly that we've got intakes of new students, engaging different partners that come and say, here's our problem. Can you help us solve this particular problem? Different elements, different end uses, different types of wastes, and bringing partners together around that to develop that. The next 5 years is really going to be focused on getting all of that infrastructure in place and getting all of that, business and organization stuff organized and sorted. And then after that, it's making it a fluid process, and we can keep pumping those solutions out, and hopefully at a higher rate.
Now, I don't believe in jinxing anything, but what I'll say is that I fully believe that you'll succeed in this endeavor.
Thank you.
And, we're happy to ride your coattails to that finish line. No, of course. We
partnership,
yeah, no,
arm in arm. I'd rather
I say it in jest, of course.
Be, leaning on you guys rather than dragging you along.
Of course. No, we're fully aligned. And, if in 10 years we can say, there's a center that we can all go to have these kinds of discussions and say, wow, we actually did that, I think it's going to be a really, really exciting accomplishment. And we should actually take time, instead of writing the next grant at that point, to say, look what we did, and actually pat ourselves on the back, because I think it's one of those things where things are moving so quickly, even now with the critical minerals race, that we don't ever take time to smell the roses. And I think we should do more of that. But
smell the sulfur. Yeah.
Smell the sulfur.
I think it's important, like you say, I've caught myself doing this too, is acknowledge the incredible things we have achieved. And I can't wait for the Unlikely Innovators podcast on-site edition when we break ground and cut the ribbon and are running those pilot-scale bioreactors. Yeah. That hum is going to be a really magical sound, and I hope you guys feature it.
Well, by then, I'll probably have been replaced by Dean Cain or some other reasonable, more attractive facsimile. But for the time being, I'll sign on for that.
Yeah, we'll see what Spotify has to say about that at that point. But
no, exactly.
Before we let you go, because I know that's where Steve was, he was winding up, and we know we have to get you on your way because it is grant writing season. Applications are due. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, how important is the acronym in the title of the grants that you put in, because I think
That's funny, yeah.
all the listeners who are in the space writing research applications are always thinking about like, I need another letter so that this
Catchy.
could be like a catchy name. So I say this in jest, but like, do you struggle with trying to come up with a title, or you just, you know what, at the end of the day, I just need to get this out. We'll worry about the name later.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that. So my earliest grants, we didn't care about a catchy acronym. You just made up the acronym, and sometimes it never rolled off the tongue. It was consonants that should never be put next to one another, and you'd try to shove a vowel in there somewhere. But now, I know you laugh because you've also lived it. Here's the thing. AI is solving this for us now. So there are several websites that I will share with you where you literally put in, here are my keywords and the topic that our grant represents, and it will spit out 20 to 30 catchy acronyms.
Oh my God, that's a game changer.
I know.
Maybe that's a show notes.
We've actually had whiteboard sessions where we're like,
what's the name?
Does this sound okay? Yeah.
Can we use the as a T?
Yeah. Yeah. So I will share that with you.
Okay.
Oh, that's awesome.
AI is going to help, unclutter our brains on trying to come up with something catchy like
But then what will we do?
Spend more time writing the grants.
Very good, yeah.
But,
instead of having full boardroom meetings on names, we should,
Can we use the H and the and the T?
Yeah, can we use both?
Small letters, bigger letters, emphasize.
Yeah. And then we think about it like the bureaucrats evaluating it. Maybe they don't ever even care.
Actually, it's funny you say that, because think about how many times you end up using the acronym afterwards.
That's true.
Yeah.
In all press releases, short forms, it becomes the identity. Names matter.
Names matter,
So pick it well.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's a good note to leave it on. Names matter. Dr. Nadia Mykytczuk, thanks again for joining us.
Well, thank you guys. I really enjoyed it.
And we'll see where the future takes us, but I'm sure it'll be
ribbon cutting next time.
Ribbon cutting. Live podcast at a ribbon cutting. But you're probably tracking to be our first 3-time guest, so we'll definitely look forward to that. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much, guys.
Steve and I have an inside joke right now where everything is a humble brag, which of course it's not always a humble brag.
Even if it's not bragging.
And I mean, I guess it's only funny to us, and it's probably not funny to you listening to it. But anyway, he made me laugh before we started rolling again, so that's why I brought it up. But Steve, we are in the lab still, obviously as evidenced by our attire. I'm going to get on the 1s and 2s really quickly and run some experiments.
Yeah, we need you on the GCMS, I think.
Yeah, I think I'll do that. I'm fully trained and qualified to operate that. But off camera, when Nadia was here, we were talking about how oftentimes when you do a grand opening or you do a demonstration in a facility like this, there is a tendency among the comms or the operational folks to say like, we have to demo this, so like let's get some blue liquid in these beakers, and I want you to really over the top pipette some things and maybe swirl the beaker above your head so we can see the liquid sloshing around. We know that a lot of real science happens in here, but what is your go-to science experiment to really show off your scientific prowess? I know what mine is.
My scientific prowess?
Yeah, like what is your go-to if you have to show Nick something that's going on? Like what would you if you had what are you pulling out of your chest?
Yeah, we actually do play a game, him and I, when we're out exploring the nature. So we go on a lot of nature hikes, but one of the things is when we see a pile of gravel, we actually do an open pit mining simulation. So we actually take sticks and start to make like either tunnels in the side or start an open pit ramp, and he loves it. So we call it playing mining. So I'm such a loser that not only am I the Center for Smart Mining manager, I also do pretend mining with my nephew in my spare time.
You're single-handedly trying to close the skills gap in mining. You're just
one nephew at a time.
Yeah. That's great.
What about you?
Mine is way more cliche and definitely not as practical as yours, but it's obviously the baking soda volcano.
Oh yeah.
I used to do some mean paper mache as a kid, and I used to paint it so it looked like a volcano. We haven't gone that far yet, but
not a lot of our listeners would know how skilled of an artist you are. There's been a lot of caricatures of myself drawn on the board in the boardroom, but you're a skilled artist, and I know you can't say that because it would be boastful.
That would be a humble brag.
It'd be a straight up brag.
Yeah,
but he is a very skilled artist and can draw almost anything.
Well, thank you. But yes, that would be, if I had the option of going through all of these, I'm sure we can make a volcano.
Oh yeah.
Out of some of these these beakers and flasks. But
we'll try and
we
stay out
won't
of
do that,
Nadia's
though.
way.
Yeah, we won't do that.
No, not for today.
But yeah, we're very excited to be back for season 3 and to bring you this format where we're going to be doing more of these in-person interviews on location because visually it looks good. Sometimes it doesn't always sound good, but it will sound good by the time you hear it.
Yeah,
so I have no doubt about that.
Shout out to producer Paul Hamilton, who I'm looking at right now. Definitely more exciting for him to be on location with us. We were in the boats together, and now we're going to be on location together. So
So thanks again for tuning in, and we look forward to bringing you some new content for season 3, which is something I don't think either of us thought we'd get to when we started virtually. Yeah. Back, what was that, the first season of the pandemic?
Yeah.
The pandemic had seasons.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Of course, we're going to season 5 now.
Yeah. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us and taking this journey with us on season 3. Bye-bye.
The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Comito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.